My wife mocked me after I lost my job, saying, "No real woman wants a broke husband." 3 months later, she was desperate for a second chance. If you'd asked me a year ago what the strongest part of my life was, I would have answered without hesitation. My marriage. I was wrong. It turns out a relationship doesn't truly reveal its strength when life is going well. It reveals everything the moment life starts falling apart. My name is Ethan. I'm 34 years old, and until 6 months ago, I worked as a senior operations manager for a manufacturing company. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well. My wife, Claire, and I had been married for 6 years. We owned a comfortable home, drove decent cars, took vacations every summer, and rarely worried about bills. I honestly believed we were building a future together. Couldn't have been more mistaken. Looking back now, the warning signs had always been there. I just ignored them because I thought love meant accepting each other's flaws. Claire loved nice things. Designer handbags, luxury vacations, expensive restaurants, the newest phone every year. At first, I didn't mind. I enjoyed spoiling her whenever I could afford it. Seeing her smile made me happy. Whenever she wanted something, I'd work overtime. When she dreamed of remodeling the kitchen, I picked up weekend consulting work. When she wanted a new SUV because everyone in the neighborhood is upgrading, I spent months saving for a larger down payment. She always thanked me, or at least I thought she did. Now I realized she wasn't grateful. She simply expected it. Money had quietly become the foundation of our marriage, and I never noticed. Then came the day that changed everything. Our company called an emergency meeting. Hundreds of employees gathered in the conference room. The CEO looked exhausted. He didn't waste time. The company has suffered major financial losses. My stomach tightened. As a result, we're eliminating several departments effective immediately. One by one, names were called. Mine was one of them. Just like that, 10 years of loyalty disappeared in less than 5 minutes. I walked out carrying a cardboard box with my desk items. A framed wedding photo, a coffee mug my team had given me, a notebook full of ideas I'd never get to finish. Sitting in my car, I stared at the steering wheel for almost an hour. I wasn't ashamed of losing my job. Layoffs happen, but I was terrified of disappointing the person waiting for me at home. I kept rehearsing the conversation in my head. We'll get through this. I have savings. I'll find another job soon. I convinced myself Claire would understand. After all, we were partners, or so I believed. When I got home, she was sitting on the couch scrolling through luxury vacation packages on her tablet. She smiled without looking up. "You're early." I set the box down by the door. "We need to talk." She glanced at my face and immediately frowned. "What happened?" I took a deep breath. "There were layoffs today." She sat up straighter. "And I lost my job." The room went completely silent. For a few seconds, she simply stared at me. Then she asked, "When do you start somewhere else?" I blinked. "I don't know yet." She laughed nervously. "No, seriously. I'm serious. They eliminated my department." "So?" I tried to stay positive. "I've already updated my resume. I'll start applying tonight. I have enough savings to cover us for several months. I'll figure something out." She slowly stood. Instead of hugging me, instead of saying we'd face it together, she looked me up and down before shaking her head. "I can't believe this. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't pay bills." "I know." She crossed her arms. "You know what people are going to think?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "My friends. My family. The neighbors. They'll all know my husband is unemployed." I couldn't believe that was her first concern. "Claire, it's temporary." She let out a sarcastic laugh. "Temporary. That's what everyone says." I tried reaching for her hand. She stepped back. "I need you on my side right now." "My side?" She looked at the cardboard box near the door. "You've just become another financial responsibility." Those words hit harder than losing my job. For the first time since we'd met, I didn't recognize the woman standing in front of me. That evening, I spent hours sending out job applications. By midnight, I'd submitted nearly 30. I walked into the bedroom hoping things had cooled down. Claire was lying in bed watching videos on her phone. Without looking at me, she said, "My mother called." "Oh, I told her you lost your job." I sighed. "What did she say?" Claire smirked. "She said I married beneath myself." I stared at her. "And you thought that was funny?" She shrugged. I didn't disagree. I slept on the couch that night. The next morning, I woke up early and started applying for even more positions. By lunchtime, I'd already completed 5 interviews over video. I felt hopeful. Maybe I'd find something quickly. When Claire came home that evening, she noticed me typing on my laptop. "Still unemployed?" I looked up. "I'm interviewing." She rolled her eyes. "Good luck with that." Then she walked upstairs. No encouragement, no interest, nothing. A few days later, she invited 2 of her closest friends over for dinner. I offered to cook. She refused. "We're ordering." During dinner, one of her friends smiled at me. "So, Claire told us about work." I nodded politely. "I'm interviewing with several companies." Before I could say anything else, Claire interrupted. "He's basically a full-time house husband now." Her friends laughed awkwardly. I forced a smile. "It's only been a week." Claire took a sip of wine before saying the sentence that would change everything. She looked directly at me and said, "Let's be honest. No real woman wants a broke husband." The table fell silent. Her friends immediately stopped smiling. One of them quietly whispered, "Claire." But she wasn't finished. "I worked too hard to build this lifestyle. I'm not about to lose it because my husband couldn't keep his job." Every word felt like another punch. I looked around the table. Nobody knew where to look. For the first time in my life, I felt completely humiliated inside my own home. I quietly stood up. "I'm not feeling well." Claire didn't stop me. She simply shrugged and continued eating as if nothing had happened. As I sat alone in the guest room later that night, staring at dozens of unanswered job applications, I realized something painful. Losing my job wasn't the biggest loss I'd suffered that week. It was losing the illusion that my wife loved me for who I was instead of what I earned. And deep down, I had no idea that this was only the beginning of the worst 3 months of my life. The morning after Claire humiliated me in front of her friends, I woke up before sunrise. Couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept hearing her voice. "No real woman wants a broke husband." It wasn't just the words. It was how casually she'd said them. As if the man she'd promised to stand beside, for better or worse, had suddenly become an embarrassment. Still, I refused to give up. I treated finding a job like it was my job. Every morning, I was awake by 6. By 7, I had already applied to new positions. By noon, I was attending online interviews. In the evenings, I completed certification courses to improve my resume. I wasn't sitting around feeling sorry for myself. I was fighting to get back on my feet. But none of that seemed to matter to Claire. One evening, I was excited because I'd made it to the final interview for a management position at a logistics company. The salary was slightly lower than my previous job, but it was a solid opportunity. I walked into the kitchen smiling. "I think I have good news." Claire barely looked up from her phone. "What?" "I made it to the final interview." She sighed. "So, you still don't actually have a job?" My smile faded. "It's progress." She shrugged. "Call me when you sign a contract." Then she walked away. Not even a good luck. Not even a smile. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. A week later, I got the call. I didn't get the job. The company had chosen someone with more industry-specific experience. I sat in my car outside the grocery store for nearly 20 minutes, trying to compose myself. Rejection after rejection was exhausting, but I wasn't ready to quit. When I got home, Claire noticed my expression. "You didn't get it." I shook my head. She let out a dramatic sigh. "I knew it." "What does that mean?" "I mean exactly what I said." She folded her arms. "Companies don't want unemployed people." I stared at her. "Everyone who gets laid off is unemployed until someone hires them." She laughed. Keep telling yourself that. That night, I overheard her talking on the phone with her mother. She didn't know I was standing outside the bedroom. I don't know how much longer I can do this. A pause. I feel like I'm taking care of a child. Another pause. No. He's trying. Then she laughed. But trying doesn't pay for vacations. I quietly walked downstairs before she noticed me. For the first time, I wondered if my marriage could survive this. The following weekend, Claire announced she was going shopping. Want to come? I smiled. Sure. Maybe things were getting better. Maybe we just needed to spend time together. Instead, she drove us to an upscale shopping district where every store sold luxury brands. She tried on designer dresses, handbags, and jewelry that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. At the checkout counter, she handed me one of the handbags. What do you think? It looks nice. I'm buying it. I looked at the price tag. Nearly $3,000. Claire. We should probably slow down on spending until I'm working again. Her expression instantly changed. So now I need your permission? No. I'm just thinking about our savings. She slammed the handbag back onto the counter. There wouldn't be a problem if you still had a paycheck. People nearby turned to look at us. I lowered my voice. Can we not do this here? Oh, you're embarrassed? She laughed loudly enough for others to hear. I'm the one married to an unemployed man. I felt every pair of eyes in the store shift toward me. Without saying another word, I walked outside. She didn't follow. That evening, she came home carrying shopping bags anyway. She'd bought everything, using our joint credit card. When I asked why, she simply said, I deserve nice things. A month passed, then another. I still hadn't found a job. The savings account I'd worked years to build was shrinking. I cut every unnecessary expense, canceled subscriptions, stopped eating out, sold my expensive watch, even sold my motorcycle. Claire didn't sacrifice a single luxury. If anything, she spent more than before. When I questioned it, she had the same answer every time. I refuse to live like we're poor. One afternoon, I received an email inviting me to interview with a fast-growing technology company. The role was different from my previous work, but the company was expanding rapidly. The interview was in another city. I told Claire during dinner, I have an interview on Friday. She didn't look impressed. What company? I told her the name. She immediately laughed. I've never heard of them. They're growing quickly. So are a lot of companies that go bankrupt. I think it's worth a shot. She smirked. You'll probably waste money traveling just to get rejected again. I stared at her. Do you even want me to succeed? She looked me straight in the eyes. I want the man I married back. Then she stood up and walked away. Those words stayed with me all night. Not because they motivated me, but because they made me realize something. The man she married had always been kind, hardworking, loyal, honest. The only thing that had changed was my paycheck. Friday morning arrived. I packed my suit, printed extra copies of my resume, and quietly headed for the door. Claire was drinking coffee in the kitchen. She didn't even ask where I was going. As I reached for the doorknob, she spoke without looking up. Don't get your hopes up. I turned around. What? You're not exactly in a position to be picky anymore. I nodded slowly. You're right. She looked surprised. I can't afford to be picky, so I'll keep working until someone gives me a chance. Then I smiled politely, because giving up isn't an option. I walked out before she could respond. As I drove toward the interview, I had no idea that this trip would become the turning point of my life. Not because of the job itself, but because of the person I was about to meet. Someone who would unknowingly help expose just how little my wife believed in me and how quickly that would come back to haunt her. The interview was in a city nearly 4 hours away. I left before sunrise. The entire drive, Claire's words echoed in my head. Don't get your hopes up. Normally, before a big interview, she'd text me something encouraging. Good luck. You've got this. I believe in you. This time, nothing. Not even a single message. When I arrived at the company's headquarters, I was surprised. The building was far more impressive than I'd expected. Modern offices, hundreds of employees. The receptionist greeted me warmly. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes. We've been expecting you." She handed me a visitor badge and escorted me upstairs. The interview lasted nearly 3 hours. Instead of asking only technical questions, they wanted to know how I handled pressure, managed teams, and solved difficult problems. For the first time in months, I actually enjoyed talking about my work. As I stood to leave, the CEO, Michael, smiled. "I have one last question." "Of course. If another company offered you more money tomorrow, would you leave us?" I thought for a moment. "No." He raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "Because salary matters. But respect matters more. I spent 10 years giving everything to one company. I don't expect lifelong guarantees. But I do expect honesty. If a company treats people with respect, they'll usually return that loyalty." Michael smiled. "So that's your answer?" "Yes. I'd rather work somewhere I'm valued than somewhere I'm simply paid." He stood up and shook my hand. "Thank you for your honesty." As I drove home, I felt strangely peaceful. Whether I got the job or not, I'd been myself. When I walked into the house that evening, Claire was sitting on the couch with her laptop. She didn't ask how it went. Instead, she asked, "Did you pick up my dry cleaning?" I blinked. "No. I was at the interview." She sighed dramatically. "I guess I'll do everything myself." I stared at her in disbelief. "You didn't even ask how it went." She shrugged. "If they wanted you, they'd have called already. It's been 2 hours." "So?" I quietly walked upstairs. I was too exhausted to argue. The next morning, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello. Good morning, Ethan. This is Michael from yesterday's interview." My heart started racing. "We were very impressed." I held my breath. "We'd like to offer you the position." For a second, I couldn't speak. The salary wasn't quite as high as my previous job, but the benefits were excellent. The company offered profit sharing, performance bonuses, and leadership training. Most importantly, it was a fresh start. "I'd be honored to accept." Michael laughed. "I was hoping you'd say that. We'll email the paperwork this afternoon." I thanked him repeatedly before hanging up. For the first time in nearly 3 months, I smiled. A real smile. I walked downstairs. Claire was making breakfast. "I got the job." She looked up briefly. "Oh." I waited. Nothing. No hug. No congratulations. No excitement. Just, "Oh, aren't you happy?" She shrugged. "Depends. On what? How much does it pay?" I told her the salary. She frowned. "That's less than your old job. It's still a great opportunity." "So you're settling." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I've been unemployed for almost 3 months. I'm grateful someone believed in me." She rolled her eyes. "You always settle for less." I quietly picked up my coffee and walked away. That evening, I signed the employment contract. My first day would be Monday. I spent the weekend reading company manuals and preparing. I wanted to make a strong first impression. Monday arrived. The office exceeded every expectation. The culture was completely different from my old company. People actually smiled. Managers thanked employees. Ideas were welcomed. By the end of my first week, Michael called me into his office. "I've been reviewing your interview notes." I nodded. "I think we underestimated you." "What do you mean?" He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a proposal for a major operational improvement. One I'd casually mentioned during my interview. "We analyzed your suggestion. It could save us millions over the next few years." I stared at him. "You were actually listening?" He laughed. "Of course. We hired your brain, Ethan. Why wouldn't we use it?" No one had spoken to me like that in years. When I got home that evening, I was genuinely excited. "I think this company is different." Claire barely looked away from her phone. "Good for you. I met the CEO again today." "So?" "He wants me involved in a major project." She sighed. "Can we talk about something else?" I stopped talking. A week later, I worked late preparing my proposal. When I got home around 9, I noticed Claire quickly locking her phone. "Who's texting you?" She smiled. "Just friends." "Which friends?" "You don't know them." The answer felt rehearsed. Over the next several days, the same thing kept happening. She started hiding her phone, taking calls in another room, leaving the house saying she was meeting coworkers, coming home much later than usual. Maybe I was being paranoid. Or maybe months of emotional distance had finally made me notice things I should have seen much earlier. Then, one Friday evening, I arrived home earlier than expected. Claire didn't hear me come in. She was in the dining room, laughing on a video call. I heard a man's voice through the speakers. She smiled and said something that made my blood run cold. "Don't worry. He still has no idea." I froze in the hallway. Before I could move closer, she noticed me. Her smile disappeared instantly. She ended the call so quickly that she nearly dropped her phone. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she forced a nervous laugh. "Oh, you're home early." I looked at her. "Who were you talking to?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she slipped her phone behind her back. And in that moment, I realized my job loss might not have been the only thing destroying my marriage. 3 weeks after joining Redwood Dynamics, my life looked completely different. For the first time since losing my old job, I woke up excited instead of anxious. The work was challenging. The team respected me. And, most importantly, my ideas actually mattered. David, the company's founder, believed in promoting people based on results, not titles. Within my first month, I helped solve a supply chain issue that had been costing the company hundreds of thousands of dollars every quarter. The solution wasn't complicated. No one had simply taken the time to look at the entire process. David called me into his office one Friday afternoon. "I've been reviewing your work." I smiled nervously. "I hope that's a good thing." He laughed. "It's a very good thing." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a promotion offer. I stared at the number printed under annual salary. It was nearly double what I had earned at my previous company. I looked up, convinced I'd read it wrong. "There has to be a mistake." David shook his head. "No mistake. You've earned it. We're expanding, and I want you leading the new operations division." I couldn't speak. Just 2 months earlier, I'd been questioning my worth. Now someone was trusting me with one of the biggest opportunities of my career. When I got home that evening, Claire wasn't there. She had gone out with friends. Again, the dining table was covered with shopping bags, luxury shoes, designer perfume, jewelry. I sighed. She was still spending money as if nothing had changed. The next morning, I sat down with a notebook and listed every household expense. Mortgage, utilities, insurance, groceries, car payments, savings. Then I compared it with our bank statements. My stomach tightened. Over the last 3 months, while I had been selling my motorcycle and cutting every unnecessary expense, Claire had spent over $28,000 on luxury shopping, expensive dinners, and weekend trips with friends. Most of it had come from our joint account. I checked again, hoping I'd made a mistake. I hadn't. That evening, I waited until she came home. "We need to talk." She barely looked up from her phone. "What now?" I turned my laptop toward her. "Can you explain these charges?" She glanced at the screen for 2 seconds. So, Claire, you've spent almost $30,000. She shrugged. "I needed things." "You needed 4 designer handbags?" "They were on sale." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "We've been living off savings." She rolled her eyes. "You've got a job now." "Exactly. Which means we should rebuild our savings." Instead of agreeing, she laughed. "You worry too much." I closed the laptop. "No, I've been the only one worrying." She folded her arms. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means while I was wondering how we'd pay our bills, you were buying handbags." Her face hardened. "So now you're judging me?" "I'm asking you to be responsible." She stood up. "I've supported you for months." I stared at her in disbelief. "Supported me? You mocked me. You humiliated me." You called me a broke husband. She looked away. I was frustrated. No. You were cruel. For a moment, she said nothing. Then her phone buzzed. She smiled after reading the message. I'm going out. We're not finished. We are for tonight. She grabbed her purse and walked out. As the front door closed, something inside me changed. For months, I kept telling myself that once I found another job, everything would return to normal. Now I understood the truth. The job had never been the real problem. Our marriage was. The following Monday, David invited several department heads to dinner with a few important investors. As the newest division manager, I was expected to attend. It was held at one of the nicest restaurants in the city. Halfway through dinner, I heard a familiar voice. I turned around. Claire. She had come to the same restaurant with two of her friends. The moment she saw me wearing an expensive tailored suit and sitting at a table with executives, her eyes widened. She slowly walked over. Ethan? I stood politely. Hi. She looked around the table. What's all this? Before I could answer, David smiled. You must be Ethan's wife. Claire forced a smile. Yes. David shook her hand. Your husband has been incredible. We're lucky to have him. He just saved this company a fortune. Several executives nodded in agreement. One investor laughed. Don't let anyone steal him from us. Claire's expression changed completely. For the first time in months, she looked proud to stand beside me. Not because of who I was, because of who everyone else believed I was. She suddenly slipped her arm through mine. I gently stepped away. A small movement, but she noticed. So, she smiled awkwardly. Things are going well? They are. I'm happy for you. I thanked her politely. Then David asked everyone to return to the table because dessert was being served. As I walked back, I overheard one of Claire's friends whisper, Isn't that the husband you said couldn't keep a job? Claire didn't answer. She couldn't. For the rest of the evening, she kept glancing toward our table, watching, smiling whenever I looked in her direction, acting like nothing had happened. But I remembered everything. Every insult, every laugh, every time she'd made me feel worthless because of a temporary setback. When I arrived home later that night, she was waiting in the living room. Dinner was already prepared. Candles were lit. My favorite dessert sat on the table. It was the first thoughtful thing she'd done in months. She smiled nervously. I thought we could spend some time together. I looked around the room, then back at her. Why now, Claire? She hesitated. I've been thinking. I haven't been the best wife. I said nothing. She slowly reached for my hand. I think we should start over. For a split second, I wanted to believe her. But then I remembered the night she laughed and said, No real woman wants a broke husband. And I couldn't help wondering, did she miss me? Or did she miss the successful man everyone was praising again? I looked into her eyes, searching for an answer. What I found instead made my heart sink. Because for the first time, I realized her apology had come only after my paycheck returned. And that changed everything. Claire's sudden change in attitude should have made me happy. Instead, it made me suspicious. For nearly 3 months, she had treated me like a burden. Now she was cooking my favorite meals, asking about my day, and sending me sweet text messages while I was at work. It didn't feel genuine. It felt calculated. The next morning, she kissed me goodbye before I left for the office. Have a great day. 3 months earlier, she hadn't even wished me luck before an interview. Now she was acting like the perfect wife. The timing wasn't lost on me. At lunch, David noticed I seemed distracted. Everything okay? I smiled politely. Just some things at home. He nodded. My father used to tell me something. When people only respect you during your victories, they never respected you to begin with. Those words stayed with me for the rest of the day. That evening, I got home earlier than usual. The house was quiet. Claire wasn't there. I called her. No answer. An hour later, she finally walked through the front door carrying several shopping bags. Again. Where were you? Out. Doing what? Shopping with friends. I looked at the bags. Weren't we supposed to start saving? She froze for a second before smiling. I only bought a few things. I quietly took one of the receipts from the bag. Almost $5,000. For a single afternoon. I placed the receipt on the table. You call this a few things? Her smile disappeared. I can spend my own money. Our money. She crossed her arms. So now you're controlling me? No. I'm asking you to be accountable. She rolled her eyes and walked upstairs without another word. That night I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I noticed Claire quietly getting out of bed. She picked up her phone and tiptoed downstairs. Something didn't feel right. I waited a minute before following. From the hallway, I could hear her whispering. No! He doesn't suspect anything. A pause. I'll figure it out. Another pause. I just need more time. My heart started pounding. She ended the call before I could hear anything else. The next morning, I checked our phone bill. One number appeared over and over again. Dozens of calls. Late at night. Early in the morning. During work hours. Always the same number. I wrote it down. Instead of confronting her, I asked my private investigator friend, Mark, for a favor. Years ago, we'd worked together on a charity event. He now owned a licensed investigation firm. I explained everything. The insults, the spending, the secret calls. He listened quietly before saying, "Give me 48 hours. 2 days later, Mark called. "Ethan, you need to see this in person." I drove straight to his office. He placed a folder on the desk. Inside were photographs. Claire entering an expensive restaurant. Claire sitting across from the same man I'd heard on the video call weeks earlier. Claire laughing, holding his hand across the table. Another photo showed them leaving together. Then another. They hugged before getting into separate cars. I stared at the pictures. My chest felt heavy. Are they? Mark shook his head. I didn't see anything intimate beyond that. But they've met several times over the last month. I flipped through more photos. Lunches, coffee shops, hotel lobby, business district. Always together. Always smiling. I closed the folder. Do you know who he is? Mark handed me another page. His name was Ryan. A financial advisor. Divorced. No criminal record. No obvious connection to Claire. I thanked Mark and drove home in silence. That evening, Claire greeted me with a smile. I made your favorite dinner. I looked at her. When were you planning to tell me about Ryan? The smile vanished instantly. Who? I placed one photograph on the table. Her face turned completely white. She picked it up with trembling hands. Where did you get this? I asked you a question. She swallowed hard. He's just a friend. A friend you secretly call every night? You checked my phone records? You've been lying to me for weeks. She quickly shook her head. It's not what you think. Then explain. She looked down. Before she could finish, the doorbell rang. Claire frowned. Were you expecting someone? No. I opened the door. A woman I'd never seen before stood on the porch. She looked exhausted. Red eyes. Trembling hands. Are you Ethan? Yes. She glanced past me toward Claire. Then she quietly said something that made the entire room fall silent. My name is Jessica. I'm Ryan's ex-wife. I think your wife and my ex-husband have been lying to both of us. Claire's face lost every bit of color. For the first time since all of this began, she looked truly terrified. And I knew whatever came next was going to expose far more than secret phone calls. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Claire stood frozen in the middle of the living room. Jessica remained at the front door, gripping her purse tightly. Finally, I stepped aside. Please, come in. Jessica thanked me quietly and sat on the couch. Claire refused to look at her. What are you doing here? Claire asked. Jessica took a deep breath. I came because I couldn't let another person be lied to. Claire immediately stood up. I don't know what she's talking about. Jessica calmly pulled out a folder. I think you do. She slid several photographs across the coffee table. I had already seen some of them, These were different. Claire and Ryan having dinner. Claire and Ryan walking through a shopping mall together. Claire getting into Ryan's car. One photo showed Ryan placing an expensive necklace around Claire's neck. Jessica looked at me. I hired an investigator during our divorce. I thought Ryan was seeing someone else. She paused. I didn't know that someone was your wife. Claire's voice shook. You've got this all wrong. Jessica ignored her and handed me another document. Credit card statements. Hotel reservations. Restaurant bills. Every reservation had been made under Ryan's name. Several of the dates matched the nights Claire had claimed she was working late or with friends. I looked at Claire. How long? She didn't answer. How long? Her eyes filled with tears. It wasn't what you think. I laughed bitterly. You've said that before. This time, answer the question. She slowly lowered her head. About 2 months. 2 months. Almost the exact amount of time I'd been unemployed. I felt something inside me break. So while I was selling my motorcycle to keep us financially stable, you were having dinner with another man? She started crying. I was confused. No. You made choices. Jessica quietly stood. I've said what I came here to say. Before leaving, she looked at me. I'm truly sorry. You deserved to know. After she left, silence filled the house. Claire finally walked toward me. I made a terrible mistake. You think. I never meant for it to go this far. I looked at her in disbelief. Which part? The insults? The cheating? Or making me feel worthless because I lost my job? She burst into tears. I was angry. No. You were selfish. She reached for my hand. I stepped back. I love you. I couldn't help laughing. Love. When I lost my job, I needed my wife. You called me a failure. You laughed at me in front of your friends. You told me no real woman wanted a broke husband. Her shoulders shook as she cried. I didn't mean it. You looked me in the eyes and said it. You meant every word. She fell to her knees. Please. Don't leave me. I'll change. I'll do anything. For months I had imagined this moment. I thought hearing those words would make me feel victorious. Instead, I felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. Just peace. I walked to the hallway closet, took out a folder, and placed it on the coffee table. She looked down. Divorce papers. Her hands began trembling. You already? I met with a lawyer weeks ago. She stared at me. You planned this? No. I prepared for it. There's a difference. She cried harder. We can fix this. I slowly shook my head. I spent 3 months trying to fix us. You spent those same 3 months proving there was nothing left to fix. Over the next few weeks, the divorce moved forward. There were no dramatic courtroom battles. No shouting matches. No revenge. Just paperwork. Claire tried everything. Flowers. Letters. Late-night phone calls. She even asked my parents to convince me to give her another chance. They refused. My mother simply told her, my son stood beside you when life was easy. You abandoned him when life became difficult. My father added, a marriage isn't tested by success. It's tested by hardship. Claire had no answer. A month after the divorce was finalized, I received another promotion at work. David called me into his office. You've earned this. The raise was generous. But this time, the money didn't matter as much, because I'd learned something far more valuable. My worth had never depended on my salary. It had never depended on someone else's approval. Real confidence comes from knowing who you are, even when life temporarily knocks you down. A few months later, I ran into one of Claire's old friends at a grocery store. She smiled awkwardly. I heard Claire still talks about you. I nodded politely. She says losing you was the biggest mistake of her life. I simply smiled. Some mistakes can't be undone. Not because forgiveness is impossible, but because trust, once shattered, rarely returns the way it was. As I walked back to my car, I thought about the worst day of my life, the day I lost my job. At the time, I believed it had ruined everything. Now I realized it had actually revealed everything. It showed me who stood beside me when I had nothing to offer except my character. And it exposed the person who only valued me when my paycheck made her life comfortable. 3 months after calling me a broke husband, Claire wanted another chance. But by then, I had already found something far more valuable than a new career. I had found my self-respect. And that was one thing I was never willing to lose again.